What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be working on my 2001 Lexus GS 300. We're going to be replacing the rear brakes. This will apply to the 97 to 05 GS, but also that same sort of year range IS. So the GS and the IS share the same suspension and brake setup, so this will apply to both. So let's get the car in the garage and let's get started. Okay, first things first, let's jack up the car. I like to go on the rear differential to lift up the whole rear end of the car. So here's where I put my jack stands, right on this plate right here. I don't like to go on the pinch rail with these kinds of jack stands because they don't have the notch for the to accommodate for the pinch rail, so they kind of crush the pinch rail. All right, now it's time to remove the wheel. If you don't have an electric or pneumatic impact, it's a good idea to loosen the lug nuts before you jack up the car. Otherwise your wheel's just gonna spin. I mean, you can put the e-brake on, but then you have to go take it back off. So break the lug nuts loose or use a pneumatic impact gun and take them off. If you have your stock lug nuts, they're gonna be a 21 millimeter. I have different ones, so I'm gonna use whatever I have to use. I also have wheel spacers. If you have them, obviously take them off. If you don't, then don't worry about it. Alright, next I'm going to just spray down this pin. You have to take off the pin. There's no actual sliders on this. It's just a dual piston solid mounted caliper. So I'm going to spray this pin a little bit. And right over here on the end of it, there is a tiny little cotter pin, so take that out. That releases, or that unlocks the pin. And once you do that, you can take a little hammer. I can't find mine, so I'm using a big one. But you want to just tap it out slowly. You can also use a little punch if you need to. Inspect it, make sure that this area is not rotted out, because this is basically the only thing that's holding your brake pads in here. So this is supposed to be thinner in the middle, but just make sure it's not rotted out. Alright, take these out. If you don't have new ones, it's okay to reuse these. They're just spring retainers that help the pads not stick together, or not stick to the rotor basically. Alright, getting these out can be a little tricky. But just they should come out freely. If they're stuck in there, that means you have a lot of rust going on. Wow, look at that. At this point I'm going to open the bleeder so I can squeeze the caliper back in. If your bleeder doesn't open and your caliper is good, I would just skip this step personally, but I know mine's not frozen. You can stick a pad in there if you want, or you can just be super careful and put a pry bar in there and gently, very, very gently, squeeze the caliper back in. Sometimes this boot comes out. You can just very gently push it back in. There you go. Alright, now you wait for a solid stream of brake fluid until you have no more bubbles. Snug it up. Alright, to take the caliper off, you have two 17 millimeter bolts. Put the caliper somewhere where it's not going to hang by the brake hose. I like to put it on top of the upper control arm. Next, it's time to take the rotor off of here. If it's stuck on, obviously make sure it's not because of the e-brake. And if you know it's not, then it might just be stuck to the hub. And you can either put in two 8x125 bolts in here, drive it out, or you hit it with a hammer, whatever works best for you. Mine's actually not stuck at all, so I can just pull it out. And at this point, if your hub is dirty, or rusty I should say, then clean it up. Mine is not too bad. I'm still going to clean it up, but I want to get rid of all these high spots right here, because if the new rotor sits on them, then it's not going to sit even, and obviously that's not good. At this point, it's also a good idea to inspect your emergency brake and make sure the pads still or the shoes still have meat on them. These are not the best, but they're still okay, and I don't have new ones, so I'm just going to leave them in for now. It's just an e-brake, so as long as it holds, it holds. The hardware's still good, nothing's rotted away, so I'm going to move on to cleaning the hub. This is a step that many people skip, but I believe that's very important. They make tools that can get around the lug studs and reach the hub. Mine doesn't really do that because it's not meant for this, but you can also take a wire brush or a flat blade screwdriver, whatever you have, and just scrape in between the lug studs. All right, next, before we do anything else, we want to put the new rotor on and adjust the e-brake. I'm going to put anti-seize all over the hub, but if I do that first, then I'm going to get it all over me and all over the new rotor before it's ready to actually fully go on. All right, here we go, new rotor. I'm going to put the link to all these parts and tools that I'm using in the description, so if you're interested, you can find it all there. All right, now when you're adjusting a parking brake that's inside the rotor, it's a little bit different than adjusting drum brakes. Drum brakes, you want to always have some drag on them. These, you want it to be like just barely almost touching. These are not touching at all, so I'm gonna have to tighten them up a little. It's also hard to feel for it on this particular application because it's rear wheel drive, so you have the force of the drivetrain to overcome on top of the brakes, so it's a little more difficult. All right, so in this particular application, if you spin the wheel up, it will expand the shoes. Okay, I can feel a little bit of drag now, but I think that's a little too much. So what I'm gonna do is actually go inside the car, apply the e-brake, just tap it once. That way it'll seat the shoes once they're now adjusted, and I'll see how it feels. Sometimes engaging the e-brake just once or twice will make it feel different. Yep, made it feel more snug. So I'm gonna take this off because I think that's a little too snug. And I'm going to loosen it up just one turn, or one notch, I should say. There we go. Let's see how this feels. Perfect. It's always a good idea to clean down your e-brake shoe surface. Next, it's a good idea to put some anti-seize on the hub. That way it prevents the rotor from sticking in the future, but also it prevents rust. You want to take your rotor, put it on here backwards for extra performance. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna have to clean it. Get your brake clean and just put a little bit on. You don't need much, and just wipe it down with a paper towel or a rag of some sort. You want to get the Cosmoline oil off before you start using it. Otherwise, it's, well, coated in oil. All right, flip it over, and this is going to be the final install. Before we put the caliper back on, clean it in there. Looks kind of gross. Time to put the caliper back on. To clean it, you can just take a flat blade screwdriver or pry bar or something, scraper, and just get in there and scrape everything off. If the threads of your bolts need to be cleaned up, now's the time. Snug these down and we'll torque them to 77 foot-pounds. Alright, next it's going to be time to put the brake pads on. As long as everything is cleaned up properly inside the caliper, they shouldn't need a whole lot of force to go in. They should basically just slide right in. Well, if they go in a little crooked, they'll get stuck, so make sure they go in straight. You can help them along if you want, but just make sure that it's actually not stuck in there. See how mine can freely move in there? That's what you want. Okay, it's time to install the hardware. So what I do is there are two pieces of hardware, two spring retainers, and this thinner one goes inside of the thicker one. Oops. This is the bottom, so it goes like that, and this one goes like that, hooks into here. You can try to hook this one on first. Okay, so the easiest way that I found to put this together is to put the smaller spring inside of the bigger one, just like that, and that's how they sit on the caliper. And now these two hooks go into these top holes. And then you position these so that the pin slides over this big hook and over these small ones. So kind of like this. There you go. Just double check that the top springs are still in, and they are. All right, put the cotter pin in. Make sure it clicks in, and there you have it. Now let's put the wheel on. Okay, so for me, spacers go on next. Make sure the back of the spacer is clean. Put it on. I forgot thread locker. Always apply thread locker with wheel spacers. At this point, I'm going to apply my e-brake and torque these down to the wheel torque, technically 76 foot-pounds. I'm going to go 80. And lastly, the wheel. If you haven't noticed, I'm on the lowest setting, so it's not actually making them too tight. Same torque for these. All right, let's put the car back on the ground, check the brake fluid. And now that the car's down, go into the engine bay, look at the master cylinder, check the condition of the fluid. It looks pretty good. I know it looks dark on camera, but it's not as dark in person. Check the level. Level looks okay. I'm gonna leave it as is, and when I do the front brakes, I'll change the fluid as well. All right, so I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have anything to say, just make sure you leave it down in the comment section. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one.